Hello, my name is Laura. I'm going to talk a little bit about the basics of pruning trees. So if you have trees in your garden pruning, and probably most of them will at some point, there's a good place to start. That is first to know what your tree is. This is a flowering cherry, so normally we would not prune this in the spring because it's going to bloom right away. But I'm going to point out some obvious problems and maybe deal with those because they need to be taken care of. When you look at a tree, besides knowing what it is so that you know when or if it blooms, you want to look at an overall shape, look at the shape of the tree. You want to decide if there's an obvious problem. Sometimes there's crossing branches that need to be dealt with. Sometimes there's dead or broken branches that happen during the winter. Sometimes there's a disease problem. And then other times there's things that are more aesthetic, that you just want to make the tree look better when you're overall, to make it look aesthetically pleasing. So one thing that I like to do, and you really do have to stand back and don't be afraid to meditate on your tree a little bit, but what you're going to look for, at least when we're doing, there's no obvious problems here. I don't see any obvious branches. I see too many branches, and that's a problem. So when I look at a tree, I like to look and I say, well, every branch needs some sunshine. So we're going to try to make sure that this tree every branch gets some sunshine. So I'm looking, and this branch is going to take sunshine from this one. So do I want to keep this one or this one? And that's something I'm thinking about. And this one is kind of in that same plane as well, and maybe this one needs to come out. It's also a little low because the lawnmower comes right here, and that's something else you need to take into consideration. And then the other thing is there's some poor cuts that have been made in the past, or maybe a break that we need to correct. So that's what we'll do on this tree just really quickly. And it won't be a deep prune, but it'll be a light prune for this tree. So what do you think? This one, or this one? I think actually both. This one's going to have to come off.
This one right here?
Yeah, I'm going to take that one off. And then let's do... Now when you prune a tree branch, trees, unlike shrubs, have a branch, well, shrubs may have branch collars, but they're not quite the same as a tree. Trees have a branch collar that comes around, and it's kind of a thickening, and in bigger branches you see it right here, sometimes on the top, sometimes all the way around. You don't want to cut into that branch collar, because what happens is it can't heal once you cut into that collar. It heals much quicker if you leave that collar. That's where all the swelling happens that allows this bark to cover that cut. And that's what you want to happen as soon as possible. So that's something, when you make your cuts, don't make them too shallow on a tree, but don't leave a stump either. So it's kind of that perfect middle ground that you're looking for. Sometimes, depending on the tool, you'll get a better cut. So these loppers have a way of cutting, but they get themselves in the way. Sometimes you can't get quite close enough and you leave a little stump that you need to clean up with a handsaw sometimes. Sometimes not. If you can trim your tree when it's small like this, then you avoid problems as it gets larger. They've already been taken care of, and you don't have to do it again when they're big. When you're cutting a big branch off a tree, it's a bigger process. It takes much more time, and it's energy from the tree. Okay, this branch is a little low, and we're going to take it off. It's a larger branch, so we need to do a 3-step process. So we're going to make an undercut that stops the bark from ripping. That should do it. And then we're going to take the weight of the branch off. And if you saw slow enough, as the branch starts to go, you make sure somebody can grab it. There we go. And then it doesn't hit anybody. So now we just take off the stump. And when we do this, there's a branch collar that runs around every branch down here, and you can see it's kind of a swelling or a thickening, and you want to leave that because that's where the branch heals. So we're going to try to cut not straight down parallel with the trunk, but at a little bit of an angle so that we leave as much of that as possible and take as small a cut as possible, leaving as the least amount of surface to be covered by the tree with bark. Okay, there we go. Okay, we're going to look at this tree. It's a fairly young tree, and overall it has a nice shape, but there's some real problems here that we want to deal with. So if you can see right here, this branch rubs on this larger branch, so it needs to come off. There's no fix for that except removal. So we're going to take that branch off. And this branch has decided it's the leader or the head of the tree anyway, so this one's really not necessary. We've got a couple of low branches, another crossing branch Greg's going to take off over here that rubs from underneath, and a couple of low branches that we can lop off. There's a little too much congestion. If you can see, this is a bad right here. We'll have to take that off. That's a bad crotch for a tree. That's a bad angle to have a branch come out, and eventually it'll need to be removed. So I'm going to take some smaller ones off right away, but let's do this. Is it better? Is it better from back there?
Yeah, come right here.
Okay.
Come right here.
Yeah, and so we're going to do, I don't think this branch is big enough to rip, but you never really know. So we'll do a 3-cut. Oh, okay, we got a weight problem. Okay, so to keep this branch from binding, we had to cut a wedge in here so that we can get the blade working, and we're still going to have trouble with it. And then you don't want to be underneath it when it falls. So it's always good to have a helper when you're pruning, just to watch out for that. Yep. And then we'll take this stump off. Okay. Then, as I look, we've got this problem still to deal with, that bad crotch there, and then actually there's a couple. And these two, what do you think, Greg? Which one should we take off? We've got a problem with this one, probably that one, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'll just take the bulk of it off. And then we'll take the stump off. These problems could all have been avoided if when the tree was put in and quite young they were dealt with, and then you would only have a little tiny twig to cut off that was a problem. But sometimes you don't know to do that, so then you deal with it later. What else do you see? I think we have to take that one. This one could go, Greg. Right there, that low branch.
Yeah.
So we're looking for, as the tree gets larger, problems. We don't want to hit somebody as they walk by. That one's going to be tough.
Another thing, there's another problem, like right here. You got this one coming up, you got that one coming up. This one right here could actually be eliminated. You see that?
Right.
That could be eliminated.
It's going to be 10 minutes for me to saw through this thing.
Your arms.
Oh, okay. Not the perfect cut, but I'll have to do. Yeah, you want to cut the big one?
Start like right here, maybe.
Yeah, I'd clean out that.
Right in here.
Yeah. I think that should go. Oh. For these two branches, it's a little tight, so we don't want it. And we're going to try to give it more space. These are a little tight, tightly branched. You got it? Okay, go ahead, I'll hold it. Okay, so once we do that, we're going to take off a couple of these other branches, give it more breathing room.
You take this one off.
Uh-huh, yeah. Okay, so that opened that up a little bit. They're not so tightly clustered. All right. Any other problems you see? I think we can take off this lower branch right here. And the bottom of this that hangs down. Sometimes certain trees have habits where they just grow branches down. Redbuds, for instance, and lindens have a lot of branches that grow from the bottom of
A lot of times you'll have a branch that grows way out here.
Yeah.
And it hangs down.
Right.
You'll have some that hang down. If you take those out,
yeah,
sometimes the weight, it'll actually go back up.
lift it back up.
Lift it
Yep.
back up instead of, taking out the whole thing.
Yeah, and then it's out of people's eyes and it doesn't hit anyone and the tree looks more open and it has a better shape. So I think that looks a lot better. Maybe there's one or two little things we could do. What do you
Take out
think?
this one right here.
Yeah.
Just kind of running parallel.
Yep. Yep, that's not needed. I have to just say one thing. When you're pruning a tree, there is not too many wrong ways to do it. Most of the time, you just have to have an overall picture. It's not rocket science. It's just opening it up, giving everything room, and making sure everything has its own space to get sunlight. And they don't rub and touch, and room to grow. And that's what you want, a healthy tree that has a natural shape. So when you look at a tree, this tree has a leader or a central branch that's higher than all the other branches, and that's generally how most trees grow. And you want to make sure you leave that central leader. Unless it dies, it should remain for the life of the tree. So it's not something you would ever consider pruning, usually. So that would be uncommon. But sometimes there is, for specific reasons, it may die and then you'd have to cut it out. But otherwise, it should stay, because that's what gives a tree its natural shape. Okay, this is a crabapple, a young one. The reason I can tell it's a crabapple is it has persistent fruit that's lovely all winter long. It blooms in the spring, but we're going to prune it anyway because crabapples are really vigorous. And it's a great tree to practice on. If you're not sure about your pruning skills and you have a crabapple, it's a good one to practice on They grow lots of branches and they need lots of pruning. So you can feel fairly confident you can't hurt your crabapple. There's a lot of issues with them because they grow so many branches. One of them is this kind of a water sprout, a sprout that comes straight up. We've got a lot of crossing branches here. There's a lot of congestion just in this general area that we'll have to thin them out. And then some directional pruning. So what I mean by directional pruning is we've got a branch here that comes up and then crosses back over the center of the tree. That's not what we generally want with a tree. So we're going to take the end of that off so that nope, I'm going to just do this. We're going to give it a direction. So we're going to come back to the direction of a shoot that we want and take the direction we didn't want off. And actually,
crossing.
And then we've got a crossing, so take that off. And here's another crossing branch, so we're going to take that off. Right here, I'll get it, yeah. So, and then as you look at the tree, sometimes I like to look at the spacing of branches on a trunk. So here we've got no branches and then a good branch. And then a sort of a small branch, and then a big branch that's not necessarily too bad, but then we've got this one that's kind of in the way, too close here. So, and we can look at that and decide, are we going to keep that one or maybe we want to keep this one? And that's the decision you have to make as the owner of the tree. You get to choose what you want. There's some little twigs that are dead. We'll take those off. And sometimes what I have to do is stand back and look at that tree and decide, okay, which branch is going to be better overall in the long run. I like this because this is a flower bed and nobody walks under it. I'm going to keep this one and take off this one.
We got this laurel right here.
I'm just going to take the whole branch off. Yeah.
You take the whole branch off?
Yep. Then we can look at it and see that there's a lot going on here, maybe too much. So we can keep one of these. What do you think? I'm afraid of stepping on stuff here. Maybe the lower one. Little stumps, they can go. All right, and as we back out, I can see this one might need, what do you think? You can give it a direction or take it off. And then we've got some crossing branches up here. So what I'm going to do on this one is give it a direction. So we're going to shorten it. I'll just cut that off. It looks a little better. What else do we see? And sometimes this is a process. Sometimes it takes a few minutes to stand back and walk all the way around it and decide, yeah, we can take that one off and leave the other one. There's a couple of other problems at the top. It's a little bit congested, so we're going to select which branches should stay and which branches should go. And it's a little high. I'm not sure I can reach it. We're going to take off this little one. And then we've got two branches here that both take the same space. They're going in the same plane. They're kind of redundant, so we want to select one. I'm actually going to select the smaller one to take out. And that helps a little bit. We've got too much going on in here still too. So let's see. I'm going to take this one off. Hand pruners. I still think there's something at the top, but I can't get to it. And from this direction, it doesn't look too bad. So that's the other thing, is look at it from all angles.